Today on The Right Key, my guest is songwriter, composer, and conceptualist Nicholas Littlemore. From Empire of the Sun to Cirque Du Solei, Nick continues to amaze with his artistic output. This series was conducted in the spring of 2020 via Instagram, and the audio and video quality do reflect that format. However, the words and insights of these guests are still priceless. Nick Littlemore is a songwriter, composer, producer, conceptualist, and singular artist, and I do believe that. He's part of the foundation of several successful projects, including multi-award winning electronic dance group Pnau and internationally acclaimed electronic pop band Empire of the Sun. He's composed the score and is the musical director for Cirque Du Solei Zorkana, and he's produced songs for many artists, including Mika, Elton John, and lots of others. He's founded his own label called the Two Leaves label and produced a number of very creative projects and continues to come up with interesting stuff all the time. And we're going to try to get inside your mind a little bit today.
Yeah, cool. I would agree with all of that. I just don't see myself necessarily as a singular artist because I pretty much always want to collaborate with someone.
No, I think I say singular because you're unique. That's why you're singular.
Okay, sure.
So you grew up, I want to start from the beginning because I feel like the formative years have so much to do with who you become, in a way. Right. Even if it's not necessarily your home life, but what you were listening to and what you were experiencing in Sydney you were near Sydney and Wahroonga, did I say that correctly?
Pretty close.
Yeah, Wahroonga, north of Sydney.
Yeah.
Now, what were you listening to? What kind of things were you exposed to musically?
I mean, I remember really early on getting a couple of cassettes and getting a little red tape deck that had radio and you could record. I'm not sure if it had two tape decks, probably just one. And what I would do is I would record the radio just as I was falling asleep. I remember this around 7 or 8 years of age. And I would listen to what I recorded the next morning. And I remember one would have been about a few weeks into this. I recorded this song, and I didn't find out much later until about 5 years ago. This song was by a singer from New York called Karen Finlay, who is a performance artist, and made this song called Tales of Taboo, which was super wild. And, 7 or 8 year old, there's a lot of swearing and really crazy, explicit sexualized material in it. And it was like sugar for a kid at that age. And it just kind of changed a lot of things. It really struck me. Like, I liked music anyway, but it was taboo, there was something, it was like discovering something at that age that I could not show my parents,
Wow.
And I don't know, from then on, just trying to find strange, fringe things, growing up in very much a suburban, safe, middle-class kind of neighborhood.
Yeah, I took a look around at the map there to see.
Yeah.
It looks very nice there.
It's lovely. I grew up in a really nice area, but super dull, super white, and Christian and all that stuff. My eldest brother was into kind of stranger things. I guess we were somewhat chaperoned into the world, or curated through through my older siblings. And then at an early age, I discovered, I guess, the idea that music is some way of finding your own identity, and we were really specific about it. And Sam, my oldest brother, was into kind of cyberpunk in things, and James was into more English music, like shoegaze, and I kind of sat somewhere between in kind of industrial and goth, and I don't know, it was weird. Like, from a very early age, I wanted to wear these badges of what I listened to.
Mm. And you met up with Peter Mays pretty young, 10 years old?
Yeah, we were at school. I was at the local primary, and then I went to the posh school down the road, and Peter was there, and we met there, yeah.
And then you bought a bunch of drum machines, and the rest is history. No, tell me about how...
Yeah, we started raving at about 13, 14.
Wow.
And that, within a few weeks of that, we wanted to get a synthesizer.
And what were you listening to? I mean, because your dance music is different than a lot of other dance music. Although I think you have quite a comprehensive knowledge of a lot of dance music. But what were you listening to then? And
early on, I was really into industrial music and goth, and that kind of bridged at a moment in the early 90s where dance wasn't so defined. And they'd play these industrial records at raves and things like that. And there was a band called Meat Beat Manifesto who kind of crossed between dance and industrial, and they were coming. I wanted to see them. They were playing at a rave, and that kind of changed everything. And then I started listening to rave music, but finding the things. I didn't want like the straight breakbeat and that kind of happy, cheesy stuff. And that led me to the German and the Belgian stuff in the early to mid 90s. And that stuff I found to be incredibly inspiring. All analog, all sequenced, like this sort of thing. Just all daisy chained together with a few cables, and it was just amazing.
Yeah, and you stuck to that. I want to talk about it more, but you stuck to that feeling of analog being more inspiring.
Yeah, I mean, it was what it's like, I don't know, if you were growing up in the 60s and you're going and seeing garage rock bands, you'd want to emulate that. Well, I was going out and hearing these records from the other world, and from, far off in Europe, which was just an idea to me. I'd never been anywhere near or leaving the shores of Australia. But kind of trying to emulate those sounds and finding the components and the synths. The information was hard to come by. Some artists would list the gear on the back of the label, but very rarely.
And you started getting the basic stuff, and you said, "I'm going to try this for myself." And that's what led to Teenager.
Yeah, Teenager was like a long time after. Pnau was like the first thing.
Oh, Pnau was before Teenager.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
I wasn't a teenager when I started Teenager. I just wanted to still be one, probably. Yeah.
Well, you and Peter started Pnau together.
Yeah, we started around 14.
Wow.
And I didn't have any musical training. He did. He played piano since he was a child, like 5. Come up through that world. I'd come up through having strange brothers and just wanting to be different. Not being a jock in a very much a sport environment. Not being a Christian in a Christian environment. Which was nice to be an outsider, and always seeking the outsider and everything in books that I loved and films and everything else.
Yeah, I want to ask about books because your lyrics are so unique and interesting. And what were you reading then? Because that's material for the bank of
yeah, I mean, I think Junkie was probably the first book I read that really changed the way I realized you could write and read and perceive the world around you. That's William S. Burroughs, and it was only a little book. And I think probably I have some ADD because I never read really big books. They were always quite small things, short stories, novellas, or just short novels. But I really loved Burroughs, and his aspect was very much the outsider, much more an extreme version of what I was going through, being a gay man in the 50s who was also a junkie, a little different to being a slightly misfit, middle-aged, middle-class kid,
Still, you were finding your place and you felt like an outsider.
I wanted to be more of an outsider.
Really?
I wanted to distance myself from those people that were sporty, and I really wore that on my sleeve. I think I still do. It's much to my detriment.
I think it's not to your detriment. I think it's made you the unique creator that you are.
It's good to exercise more.
So then Pnau, and you guys were working on something, and you made a little record, and I think you recorded it saying that you thought it wouldn't sell anything, and you just said, you made this record and came out, and then how did things kind of take off from there? Because
initially we just wanted to hear it on one of those sound systems that we were going to hear music on, and that probably lasted for a long time, and we did a few little spots on community radio and all that sort of stuff, 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning sort of stuff, and then a couple of drive time things. That was all the first stuff, which was very trance based, very much like these sort of components, and then we got into sampling, and that led us into a whole world of music, and realizing that there was a lot of things that had parallels with the electronic stuff I was listening to that had come before, that disco and jazz and all these things were the roots. And, you know, I didn't have any musical training or learned anything really about that. It was just going guided by my ears. And then getting into sampling and realizing underneath the undercurrent of disco is really the same kind of bass lines and things that were happening in dance music.
But I think that results in some amazing stuff, you know, that the idea that, because I heard you, at least to me, before, you sold yourself short about saying, I don't have musical training. And I think that that's one of your assets in a way, because your happy accidents are things that would never be what I might think of. And well,
I think that's my strength, is trying to make mistakes and embrace them. A lot of people, I think, sit down at the piano, sit down at the guitar, or even the computer, and have quite a clear idea. I just know I want to make. That's all I know, and I embrace the way technology can fuck things up, change things, alter them, whatever. I'm not precious. It's just like a stream. Just throw anything out there, and it's similar to Burroughs' cut-up style of writing, and Bowie, I know, employed that later. Just randomness, and I still do it to this day. Right now, actually, I'm sampling a radio straight into my SP, and the SP sampler, it only has tiny little samples, so you know, nothing would end up being recognizable as a sample. But I mean, I've always embraced randomness.
Well, I want to keep on with this timeline, but that actually makes me think of a question, and surely you know about this thing about Brian Eno and imposing limitations on yourself. And you have all this technology and you have all these tools now. Do you think that the SP, having those little samples, is useful for you as a limitation?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's like limitations within a given moment, whether that moment is a whole song or a part, or even a whole project. It just depends, I guess. Some projects I've tried to really adhere to a specific set of guidelines that I put on myself, or a methodology. But, you know, I abandon things all the time and change my mind all the time. So, I don't know.
All right. Well, if you don't mind, I want to go back to this timeline. There you were with Pnau, and you had this record, Samba Nova, which had done pretty well, or at least it was being recognized. And then you met up with Luke Steele, who was doing Sleepy Jackson, which was very different. It was almost like American country, almost country music in a way, you know?
Yeah, but there was an element of wildness to what he was doing. He was incorporating some music concrete concepts, bringing in sounds from strange places, not just atonal things, but also musical things from like weird Chinese recordings. And, you know, there was something, he was somewhat of a misfit, absolutely. And growing up in Perth and making, like country-ish, psychedelic, whatever it was.
Yeah.
We connected, I don't know on what specifically, but probably just the idea of being different. And within 24 hours of meeting, I took him up to my parents' house and we made something.
Wow. But it did feel like, I mean, when you listen to Sleepy Jackson from before Empire and you listen to Pnau before Empire, it does feel like Empire moved closer to Pnau than to Sleepy Jackson in some ways.
Yeah. The idea initially for Empire was to make an acid house thing with Luke.
Oh, wow.
Like, imagine Luke over a 909 and, like, that kind of thing. And that obviously didn't work out. But, you know, they never work out when you think of it. I find that if I think of a sound, then I go in and do it. It's not what the sound's meant to be, you know. I just embraced what is working. And I knew some talented people around, and Jono Sloan being principal among them. And having him work on it was just was great. Just felt right.
You created such an interesting kind of smeary sound with all this stacking of layers, so that it didn't feel like, I mean, to my ears, it doesn't feel like any one thing you go, oh, I pick out what that is. I pick out what that is. It's more like this mash of sound. Was that something conscious that you were going for when you got started in it?
I mean, I feel like that applies to most of the things I'm attracted to and that I try and make is blur between all these different concepts and ideas and genres. So it shouldn't really feel like anything in particular, but I like the idea of evoking some kind of warm thought or memory. I'm really interested in nostalgia and messing with that, and hence probably why I have so many old things.
Yeah.
Particularly from my childhood, but I guess the gear is from the, mid to late 70s to the early 90s. And I don't know, there was something happening, for me at least. And even I think just using that technology, those digital things changed, I don't know, like there's an unknown thing, and maybe most of it I just think is happening. It's not actually, people can't even tell the difference.
No, but I think it's a valid point about nostalgic feeling sound, and I want to talk about sound because I think sound is a big part of the records and the songs that you make. Nostalgic feeling sound, but also sounds that feel unique, because now everybody has these tools, and bedroom producers, they all seem to have the same tools, you know. But
you know, it's really interesting, that concept. And I've been listening to a lot of dance music lately, because we have to do a DJ mix thing, and it's amazing how many sounds we have at our disposal right now, and we all seem to settle in to a few and just stay in that lane for a year, 6 months, and then move to another set of sounds. And I've never been interested in staying in those lanes. In the early days of electronic dance that I understood, you know, the early 90s stuff, people were trying to be as different as possible with only a very few set of elements. And, you know, there's only so much you can do with one of these things. Well, there's a lot, but at the same time, you know, you're somewhat limited by these analog synths and, you know, one note at a time and everything else.
Right, right.
To carve out your uniqueness. I always thought a uniqueness was just so important, and now people seem less interested in it.
But I've seen you work really hard towards refining the uniqueness of something and saying, no, that's, you know, that feels too obvious, you know, and with songwriting as well, and not trying to avoid obvious because of a political reason or a market reason, but just because it didn't feel artistically right to you. Yeah.
I think a lot of the pop records, early pop stuff from the 50s and 60s was incredibly inventive. Not only songwriting, but more the way they record things and what they would do. I think like those Buddy Holly records and other things of that nature were so different, and they were just making it all up. But it comes across as entertainment, and, you know, somewhere along the lines, everything gets homogenized. I just find it, at its element, it's so much more interesting, this concept of creation, when there is an unknown. As soon as there is a known, I fall into familiar patterns, and I just get bored of it.
Can you talk about how that pertains to lyrics? Because I know you write lyrics, you know, you like a lot of great lyricists, you write quickly and then refine, and then, but you're quite good at distilling emotion. And can you talk about how that works with you with lyrics, and finding lyrics that feel like they resonate but are not typical?
Well, I mean, I write a lot in notebooks, and then I also record a lot in my phone, but very few of either of those things ever make it into songs. But I feel like you're just building up all this stuff, like a glossary of phrases and terms and things. And then when the actual writing, the best stuff to my mind is when I'm feeling highly emotional, heightened in some way. Being hungover was always good for that.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know. I hate being hungover, and I don't mind being drunk, but there's something about things being more difficult. I don't know. Feel like the words come out differently, and maybe they're stronger. But I feel very much like writing lyrics is a performance art. Not and writing is different. I think probably a lot of things I've written in my notebooks will end up being stories or something, but I feel like when the music hits you, i.e. some chords or a beat or whatever, it's what comes in that moment is everything. And the more I try and write it down, it doesn't really work.
So when you're writing with artists, it's your typical process to write in the moment and then refine, or write as quickly as you can and then refine?
Yeah, I'm really interested more and more in the first instincts. And when I work with singers, I just want their first take on everything. And often they get confused by that, but that's sort of more what I'm interested in.
Yeah.
The pre-thought.
Well, it makes sense, and actually that has parallels in jazz and other performance musics for sure, where the first takes are often the best. If everybody's ready to go, if everybody's prepared for the right setting. Right.
It makes sense.
And you were talking about samples, and I see you as a collagist, and I heard a visual collagist talk about samples, and I'd never heard that term applied to music before, but I think you are a collagist where you take things and you put them on top of other things and you gather bits, whether it's samples or sounds. Had you thought about that concept with...
Yeah, I think probably like the Music Concrete stuff was quite moving, James Teeny, and that I was, always interested in weird recordings, and I found a few comps when I was early teens that were, or compilations rather, that were electronic or just strange sound experiments. And this one guy, James Teeny, in the 50s was doing remixes of Elvis records through modular and all this sort of stuff, and bringing in other sounds. That and some of obviously the French Music Concrete stuff. I loved the idea, and Meat Beat Manifesto definitely employed this concept of audio collage. It's always been more interesting to me than putting everything straight in a genre. Right.
Now, when you have to work within constraints, for example, when you were working on Zarkana and you were camped up in Montreal, how was that process for you? What sort of restrictions were on you and timelines, and how did you find yourself in that? It had to be incredibly stressful at times, and
yeah, I was like a deer in the headlights.
But you made it on the other side. So I want to know how you.
I just put the hours. I put so many hours into it and made so many things. I'm not so good at revisions. I don't, again, coming back to the instinct, it's just not how I like to work, and I don't think it's my best work when I have to go back over things, and often I'll go back to the first incantation of something and realize it's better. But you're not allowed to do that in a thing like a Cirque or a Broadway thing or a film. They want you to refine ideas, but they just don't come out that way. Like instinct, you can't have the same instinct twice. So I found it really trying. My assistant, Martin Laniel, was amazing, and we worked incredibly closely. He worked his ass off with me. There were so many changes. I think because I was hungry for the work, I wanted to prove myself after Empire that I could do something that was hard and of a certain scale, but not, pop music or whatever. And he nearly killed me.
Yeah.
But I guess I really felt for the first time that phrase, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. As a writer, not health-wise, but certainly as a writer, it really sharpened the tool. I think I just loved making music before that, and I could just do it all day. But after that, I could put things together.
Absolutely.
It's a different approach.
I see that Ben Butler is watching, and he said he remembers meeting you on the session we did with Phil Ramone.
Yeah, it was amazing. That was an incredible session for me because there were so many people that were around. I met Roy Hendrickson, who's an incredible engineer. I worked so many records with. Obviously you, we've had a long working relationship since that day. Phil, although I didn't get to spend that much time with him, I found the time I did spend with him incredibly inspirational, and just learning techniques that I had never, ever considered. and kind of feeling remiss that I never went through any kind of tutelage with someone in a studio. When I spent a lot of time with people like Roy, but you know, they work at lightning speed, and you just don't pick up on things unless you're asking for a step by step and
sure.
whatever.
But you've spent so much time in that studio, and obviously you've gotten a pretty good handle on at least some skill set, and you and Peter have done a ton of work together on various productions. So, even though it was short-lived, can you talk about the work you did for Elton John with the remixes and?
Well, that was when we just moved to London. He gave us the tapes, everything he did in the 70s. It was a hugely daunting thing to take on. And we cut it all by hand. We decided not to do any shortcuts using Ableton to time stretch everything and just mash it all together. It was kind of a monument to how we could work really hard on something. I think we put a lot of love into it, and it came out. It didn't receive as much attention as we wanted it to receive, but then those sorts of more anorak records take time to grow, you know. They grow in the hearth of the listenership, and they can kind of go outwards from that. And over the years, a lot of people come up and said, oh, you know, that's my favorite record you've done, blah, blah, blah. And we just spoke to Elton like a month ago. We're starting a new one. We're actually working on the second installment now.
Oh, fantastic. That's great. And I think that's true. And I think the same is going to be true with your Two Leaves projects. Can you talk a little bit about the conception about starting Two Leaves and what you had in mind with it initially, and maybe if the concept has changed or where you think it's headed? And there's a lot to talk about. If you don't know, Nick has this label, Two Leaves, this imprint, and he's been creating just an incredible workload of beautiful stuff and collaborations with various artists.
Yeah, I started it initially because I had some really powerful experiences with psychedelics, which I hadn't done since I was a teenager, really. And it just felt much like the randomness approach to everything else I do creatively, and well, pretty much everything in my life. I just followed it. It felt more profound than anything else, and it was sort of telling me to share music that I felt, I think, for a long time, this gaping hole between what I created and what came out in the world. And I just wanted to make more available, and celebrate my friends and people that were so inspiring to me that I'd had on sessions or I'd written some things with, and just kind of take charge. It's a funny thing, the idea of ideas, how to share them, why to share them, why this one's better than that, what weight you put on certain things, how things are. There's so many things about making that create issues that have to be dealt with in some way or another. And I think because we create because we're dealing with things, emotional things oftentimes, and then when you put it all out there in a recording or in writing or a picture or whatever, you're faced with it, for better or worse. Sometimes, I mean, that can come up really abstractly if you're talking about just blippy electronic stuff, but if you're talking about songs, oftentimes I'll get over something or listen to it twice in a day, and it'll sound completely different to me. And one time I'll hate it, and the next time I'll actually really like it. And it could just be one sound could come down a little bit, and it'll change the whole nature of what it means to me. And it's troubling. I think that's part of the reason I collaborate is so I don't have to carry all of it, you know. And it's not so much the song and the production, it's more the emotional baggage or just the weight of something that means something. And if you've done something good, it's heavier and it means more and it's easier to fuck up.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I suppose that's true. And maybe if you have more content, then you can not feel as stressed about one particular record. Is that possible?
Yeah, I think I love starting things, finishing them, because of that very thing. Is much harder.
because of the idea of you're not sure when you're done, and you're
Yeah,
not.
and whether it's going to live up to expectations, and whether the person I created it with is going to dig it, and you know, all those different things. And at some point, with pretty much everything I do, I'm just so over it, and I just want to do a new thing, and start again, and like a new relationship, and not have to any of the history or anything else, and just, you know, begin again. See if I can get it right this time.
Yeah, that's interesting. But so you must have. Oh, I'm asking this question almost rhetorically. You must have many unfinished tracks and songs sitting in your library there and on your drives.
And I can't bring myself to delete them. and I really wish I could, because I load my computer every day and there are hundreds, and that's putting it mildly, of ideas and sessions. And I work on them. I work on all of them a little bit, sometimes for a whole day, a few days, whatever. And I think maybe I'm wasting vast moments of my time because I've made so many bits rather than just scrap more, because if they were good enough, they would have been finished by now.
Maybe, or maybe not. You know, I think that everybody has their own process. And I've talked to all these people. I've talked to, I think you're maybe the 13th or 14th person I've talked to, creative person, and everybody has a different process about starting and finishing. And I think if they have remained with you, if you can't bring yourself to delete them, then there might still be something redeeming in them. Maybe not even all of them, but maybe in parts of them that they need to be finished and brought to the world. Right.
I mean, I would like to hope eventually I get most of them out. Just to have them live somewhere else, not in here.
Yeah, and you're finishing up some other Two Leaves projects coming up, yeah?
Yeah, I've done one with Billy J. Stein from
I
New
think
York.
he's here. I think he's watching.
Is he? Well, he's a marvelous fellow, as you know,
yeah.
And still similarly decked out with synths like yourself.
Oh, now, Billy Stein has like 30 times.
I mean, he has every synth on the planet. But yeah, so we created this thing, and he's been very patient with me. I've been working on it for ages. But it's being mixed now, and there's another one with a singer from Australia who Billy also worked on. So hopefully they're coming out soon. And you and I did that track recently with this rapper from Chile. It was like her first song she'd ever done. And I sort of turned a corner with it and realized I don't want to just make records that no one else wants to put out, but I want to do some things that are exciting. And part of me, which I think is dance music, which I think for a lot of my career, I've not seen it as a guilty pleasure, but I haven't taken it as seriously. I'm kind of enjoying making dance again, so I want to start putting out more direct dance.
That's great. Now, here's an interesting question, and I'm asking because I need to know the answer to this. How do you feel about the idea that art should be okay to exist just in your house and not for anybody else?
You know, I think art is a shrine. You're building a shrine and a monument or whatever. And I think creativity is a version of kind of experiencing consciousness on a higher level. You know, these things are meditations. Most of the time when I'm working, it's just the enjoyment of working. Can they live there and be valid? Of course they can. You know, recently I was in Tasmania. There's a wonderful new gallery down there called MoMA. An eccentric guy built it who's made a ton of money through the casino industry, kind of as a brilliant mathematician. And he had an exhibition there which was all op art or like found pieces and things like that that are exhumed from people's attics and things like that. And there's some incredible work that I guess was never wanted to be shared to the world, but these people are long dead and whatever. And they're absolutely stunning. I love the idea of art in isolation, and then when you're 80, someone discovers this whole treasure trove of all these things.
Well, I think this has been true of a lot of our heroes. You know, Prince and David Bowie both have quite a bit of unreleased music that they didn't feel, maybe they felt like it was worth creating, and they didn't feel like it was worth, or it wasn't ready to be out in the world, or maybe never felt like it was ready to be out in the world during their lifetimes.
It's a really tricky thing. I think when you get to a certain level, you can make a lot of things quite quickly, you know, to a certain audience. It's fatiguing. They don't want that many things coming out, and the labels certainly don't. So you end up with all these things, and then you creatively move on from that sound to this sound, and you end up with 20 things over here and 4 over there and 10 over here. When are they all going to come out? You know, with Empire, I can go through, there's probably 150 songs that have not come out.
Right.
I put together a comp the other day of the 20 best, and they're all amazing. They'll probably never see that.
I would guess that people who are listening want to hear those Empire of the Sun songs.
Yeah. But it's complicated. Because we've been working on a new record for ages, and it keeps changing sound. Some things just don't. They can feel black and white at times, and things that you're not feeling, you're really against. And in another moment, they're absolutely wonderful, and they should be shared with the world. And part of me wants things to just be created and put out that week or that month. I never think of them again.
Yeah, I sort of baited everybody, and now the responses are all coming that everybody wants to hear the songs. That's not really fair. Because
the Empire songs? Yeah,
what you're saying, which I completely understand, is that you have to find the process, and it has to feel right to you as the creator. And I had this discussion with somebody recently where there was a well-known group, and they brought out another record, and the record wasn't like the record that came before, and they said, "Oh, we're upset because the record's not like the record that came before." And I said, well, you have to give the artist the license to do their process. Well, I think, look, the point of having some kind of success is you get, a kind of weight comes on you of expectation, and always playing devil's advocate with that is fatiguing in itself. Trying to recreate an instinct or recreate something you've already done. Do you abandon it? Do you try and bring some bits through? It's a funny thing, you know. Life was much more enjoyable before I had any really big. I didn't really have any hits, but you know, like big moments. Obviously, there's great things about having success, but yeah. But you know, I think for a lot of musicians, I'm speculating. For a lot of musicians, this has been a pretty challenging time, meaning being locked down, and I think you're actually flourishing. Is that correct? Oh no, I love it. You know. I'm good with this. I would like to go to the sea, but whatever. You can't do that in LA really anyway. So yeah, I mean, can, I suppose. But I know that. No, I mean I'm locked down with everything, with all my gear. Yeah. And I have people like yourself on email and phone, so I can still keep creating pretty much at the same level. Yeah. And you've now in normal days when you're traveling, you do at least I noticed that you tend to like to go to places for inspiration, that you find that working in a specific place or in the jungle or in Japan or something can spark inspiration. Is that correct? Yeah, I think no matter where you are, even a different room, I think can evoke something different. And yeah, I love traveling and then meeting people and trying to create with them, even if we can't speak the same language, is pretty fun. Do you think that's again another type of limitation that? Yeah, I think absolutely, in a different kind of way, and it's kind of quite random. You don't know what you're going to get, and
I don't know. I've enjoyed working with people that are difficult as well, and I wouldn't include you in one of them. But and sometimes it's not more rewarding to work with someone that's really difficult, but sometimes it does put you in a different headspace, and that can be exciting too.
Yeah, that's true. And working with people who are very different from you.
Right. And I was just thinking, you know, like traveling and all that sort of stuff, you're experiencing things with sound and with smell, I think, and obviously what you're seeing. But we pay so much attention to what we see and what we taste, you know, with food and stuff like that. But there are so many different sounds in every place that we go. Even the electronic sounds are different. And they're very specific. Some of the airports in Europe have almost Eno-esque soundtracks to them. And Japan has, as you know, so many crazy sounds going on. In comparison to other cities that have very, very few, or at least the depth of sound is not quite there. I find that really inspiring.
And what are you reading these days? I know you're always reading. What have you been reading?
No, I'm not actually. I'm not reading anything. I'm reading over my old notebooks and trying to extrapolate songs out of them, actually. But I'm somewhat limited because my computer's playing up a bit. So, yeah. I should be bloody reading. I should be. I've been meditating a bit, actually. I've been doing like kind of Vedic chanting.
Yeah.
I'm not very good at it. I won't do it right now.
My cousin David is here, and he says nice SP position.
Yeah, the SP, and it's turned on. It is plugged in. I love the SP. I love it so much.
Well, Nick, thank you so much for joining us here and saying.
Oh, sorry. It's very noisy.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us and giving your thoughts and giving some insight into your wonderful process.
Yeah, no, thanks for the chat. And to all those that are listening, there's a new song I just put out today with Groove Armado in English dance act, which is really exciting. And we've got a new Pnau single coming out in a few weeks.
Excellent.
And the song that we've created with Sophia and Caruso is coming out very soon. They haven't told us exactly when, but it must be imminently coming out.
Yeah, it's coming very soon.
So thank you, Henry. And, you know, I'm really enjoying these talks that you're doing with everyone. Even though I was very nervous for my own, I really enjoy the ones you do with other people.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Nick. And have a great day there and keep creating.
Yeah, cheers.
Thanks a lot, everybody. Thanks for joining me for this episode of The Right Key. If you enjoyed the episode, there's a lot more coming. Please click the subscribe and like buttons below. If you want to know more about me or our guests, you can find lots of information in the link just below the video. See you next time.